This is Risky Women Radio, a show that connects, celebrates and champions women in risk, regulation and compliance. We're here to share the insights on the biggest issues in our industry and hear inspiring journeys from our global members. Sign up to our newsletter at riskywomen.org. I'm Kimberly Cole, your Chief Risky Woman.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. We have the pleasure today of having a very special guest with us, Gayle. Let me just do a quick introduction of Gayle to everyone. So Gayle's been with HSBC for over 20 years. She's worked in over a handful of different countries, just to name a few: Middle East, the UK, Mexico, Latin America, Vietnam, as well as Hong Kong. In 2021, she moved to Shanghai in mainland China. And just to give a bit of context, HSBC China has one of the largest number of outlets, as well as the widest geographic reach of any foreign bank in mainland China. Gayle leads the risk function there, which currently has over USD 1 billion PBT, as well as over USD 40 billion in loans. Prior to that, Gayle was also the HSBC UK COO for commercial banking. And just to add a few more, Gayle is also the co-chair of Balance in China. Balance is a global community of HSBC colleagues striving for achieving gender inclusion and equality across HSBC. She's also on the board of British Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai. Welcome, Gayle.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I think a lot of our audience are very interested to understand how you ended up where you're at today. So we're just going to dive a little bit into your career journey. So just to start, Gayle, think back for me to when you were in your university years. What were some of your career aspirations back then? And did you know you were going to become a CRO?
Definitely didn't know I was going to become a CRO. So it's a long time ago as well. But I chose to do international management and French at university, half taught in English, half taught in French. And I knew I wanted to work overseas. I kind of had that desire. But part of that university degree, the third year, you went to work and do an internship in a French-speaking country. And I was lucky to be in Paris, and I worked for a bank. And then, not HSBC, and they offered me a place on the graduate program. My boss, who's a really nice guy, and at the time, and I'm still in touch with, said, "Oh, don't accept our grad program. Check out the HSBC International Manager Program. And if you can get onto that, it's better." And that's what I did.
Oh, wow. That's a very interesting moment. So tell me, moving on, what would you say was a defining moment in your career that significantly influenced your professional journey?
I think one that stands, I mean, there are many, and I've been very lucky. I had lots of great bosses, but one in particular was when I was here in Hong Kong. I'd just moved here from Vietnam, and the one person in the team, my boss, needed to go and work on a special project. And so they asked me to cover his job. And I did that for 6 months. And then his boss, who was my boss, left and retired from the organization, and a new person came. And before he had even arrived in Hong Kong, I met him at a conference in Singapore. And we've never met each other before. I think we've maybe spoken once or twice before. And he said, I really trust you. I have heard from lots of people who are doing a great job, so I'm going to give you this job. And so I got promoted to a director, which, at that point was really quite early on in my career. And I always had come from the point of view that you need to build trust. So maybe if I worked with him for the next 6 months as the interim head and did a great job, and he saw that, then they might offer me this job, even though it felt like it's a big step. But he gave his trust right from the start.
Yeah.
I mean, a bit probably on reputation, but it was then mine to break in that, trust you to do a great job, and trust you can do this. And I thought it was just a different way of thinking about things, because and I think I then adapt myself. So actually, let's trust that the person's going to do a great job until they don't, right? Instead of making them have to build that up. So
it's just a good way of empowerment.
Yeah, really. And it really, I know exactly where I was sat and that moment and where at that time. And he knows this story because I've told it him lots of times. He's now retired, but I'm also still in touch with him as well.
And I can see how that moment is so precious to you because you're describing it like it happened like yesterday.
And it was 2010, so 14 years ago. Maybe even late 2000, early 2010.
And talking about some of these instrumental moments, I'm just wondering throughout your career, what has been some of the biggest challenges and how have you actually overcome these challenges? I'm sure there's been tons, but just name one that's,
So many challenges. I think probably one of the biggest challenges comes to mind is during COVID. I was in the UK, as you said, in 2020, and we went into the full lockdown, which in the end, the lockdown in Shanghai was much worse, but actually in the UK, no one was going into the office. And so we had to take what's a really big corporate banking business in the UK and completely have everyone work from home. And I'm sure many other organizations can resonate with that you've never done that before. Even when you do your practice of pretend something's happened, is one office is closed. So people need to have access, can go and be in the other office. And so within, I guess, maybe a week, we established a call center with everybody working from home. So we could still support all of our clients. And no one in our call center had ever worked from home before. And then during that time, which I'm sure you have experience as well, we implemented Zoom, which we didn't have before. I think that happened in a lot of companies.
Everyone was kind of scrambling a little bit.
And in the UK, there was a government scheme to provide loans to small businesses that were struggling because of they couldn't open their businesses, their shops, their restaurants, etc. because of COVID, targeted to small businesses. And anyone in the UK at the time will know it was called bounce back loans. And we had to implement it very quickly, build the tech, design how it would work, and make sure it could work within HSBC guardrails and with proper risk management, etc. And we did it as a virtual team, which I think I still can't believe it's quite incredible because you never saw any. We were maybe in like a Zoom for 14 hours a day on certain days, and people go in and out and off, but kind of pretend we were together. But I'd never worked in a virtual project like that before, despite working in a global organization. Even when it came to execution of project, you would, if you're in a global team, maybe fly to the country, meet the team, help them to implement, etc. So it really proved what can be possible. And I think that's often happens in like times of difficulty and crisis. You really see the best in people and you really see what is possible.
I totally agree with that. And I feel like whilst COVID was a very challenging time, thinking back, I think a lot of things has happened and it's almost been a blessing in disguise, almost. So now we're gonna shift a little bit and we're gonna focus on talking about your current role. So, Gayle, just to kind of give you a bit of context, right? So, Protiviti surveys each year about 800 to 1,000 C-level executives, and we try to understand what they foresee is going to be the risk for the organization this year. And so, from the 2024 survey, these are the top 5 risks that has come out for financial services globally. So, number 1, interest rate change. Number 2, economic conditions, such as inflation. Number 3, heightened regulatory changes and scrutiny. Number 4, cyber threats. And lastly, third-party threats. Just coming into 2024, how are these risks, how are these risks tracking for you? And have the events so far this year caused you to reprioritize the risk on which you're most focused on?
So all of those 5 really resonate with us. And with HSBC, I would say probably globally, but in China, on the interest rate side, obviously, we have been counter-cyclical in mainland China. So in a very low interest rate environment when the rest of the world is high. So that gives different kinds of challenges. And at some point, there's been different predictions about when that will end, but it's definitely been higher for longer in the majority of the world. And then so China's been lower for longer. And I think that, presents specific challenges in the mainland China context. I think the last two that you mentioned, third party and cyber, we put those together under the banner of resilience risk. And we also would include data security, data privacy, within that as well, and operational resilience, like how do you deal when COVID happens or something happens? How can you make sure everything continues? So they all are in our top risks for me in mainland China. The additional one, which does link somewhat to macroeconomic, but is geopolitical risk. And I think that's the nature of any global organization today, is something we have to manage. There's so much uncertainty. I think 49% of the world's population will go to an election this year, including some markets that are critical for many organizations, including ourselves. And I think that geopolitical plus the macroeconomic coming together present challenges. And in any multinational company, an area that will definitely be looked at would be the reputational risk from that. If I do one thing in this country, how will the people in that country feel, and vice versa? And that's exaggerated by media as well.
Just doesn't make your life any easier, does it? It just keeps it interesting, and it just keeps adding to the complexity. So the other item that I think is a bit of a hot topic, obviously, is generative AI. Is it possible, in your opinion, to balance balance risk management with the pursuit of innovation and competitive advantage? And how do you see generative AI shaping the risk management strategies in the future?
It's a really good question. I think, there's no choice, right? We do have to balance innovation, using new technologies with good risk management, right? I'm sure anybody in financial services would say that. And obviously, if you're in a bank, you're in the business of managing risk. So I think it's about testing, learning, that kind of iterative process, which I think historically probably big multinational companies are not good at. You have a big project that's going to last for a few years, but actually kind of taking something small and manageable and testing it in maybe one market or one line of business or one product and seeing how it works, learning from that, and then rolling it out. I think we've started to get really, really good at, both for business growth, which there's obvious user cases, but also for risk management. I think so far it's been most helpful for an AI, machine learning, etc., for repetitive processes.
Right.
Things that, maybe a bit more operational and not decision-making related.
Right.
I think what we'll see evolve with generative AI, if we can have the right guardrails in place and, make sure we're really evaluated the ethical risks that are associated with it, then you can start having decisions being made. And I think that will be a big step. I still think you will need to find the ways for how do humans and generative AI or robots work together. Different people from different backgrounds and different countries work together, but now into the mix, you're going to have robots in there and robotics. And how does that change the dynamics of the team?
How does that fit in the ecosystem?
Where are the boundaries? Yeah, exactly. And I think it's not figured out yet, right? But we are globally looking at many, many different user cases to test them, trial them. We don't want anything that doesn't do the right thing for our customers. We don't want anything that can, damage our reputation. And so having to, I think, do quite measured, targeted testing is really important.
And I guess at the end of the day, it's all about striking that balance, right? Like going at the right speed, but yet managing that risk correctly.
And I think the user cases that are probably easier and quicker to implement are internal. So, for example, you want to look up something, you maybe you ask your colleague on the future, can you remember which section in the procedure manual it tells me about this process?
Yeah.
And then, oh no, but so-and-so knows, right? Or you can do a search, like an equivalent of a Google search for the word. But what I've seen work really well is now basically using AI. I type my question in and it finds it for me, within our manuals. So that's relatively low risk, right?
Yeah.
Because someone has prepared and written those manuals and we've tested them over time. So it's just helping me navigate them. And I think you can probably have a use case like that in the client side as well, where it's trying to find a piece of information, but kind of
just creates so much efficiency as well from that end.
Saves a lot of time.
This episode is brought to you by Protiviti. Protiviti is a global consulting firm with deep expertise in transformation, risk management, and compliance. Partner with Protiviti.
So, Gayle, the CRO role, right, requires a lot of collaboration across an organization, which you're very well known for. How do you foster that sort of cross-functional cooperation to ensure that there's an understanding of risk management?
So I think it's really about, I think generally HSBC and I've been with HSBC my whole career, is a very collaborative organization, and people genuinely want to help each other out, genuinely want to make connections. So I think that is generally part of our DNA, part of our culture. So I see that as a real positive. But I also, like everything, something that's worth doing, it takes effort. So I think definitely being proactive in reaching out, sharing with others, not just when there's a problem or a crisis or an issue, but actually just in general, especially having lived and worked in lots of markets, especially when you're new to a market, making sure you get to know all the stakeholders and the dynamics within that, and then really spending proper time with people, which even despite what we said earlier on COVID and how great Zoom can be, there's nothing that beats like meeting in person, sitting down for a coffee together or going for a bite to eat and getting to know them as a person as well as, what their role is and what they do in the organization.
I like that. I guess on the last sort of topic that we need to cover is another big ticket item, ESG. Now, I know that last year you completed the Imperial Sustainable Leadership Program. What do you think are the most significant challenges financial services company will encounter trying to comply with the evolving global ESG standards?
It's a really great question. And by the way, that is a really great program, and I'm really lucky that HSBC sponsors it, but and did it with several colleagues as well. So I think the biggest challenge that financial services companies face is, how do you take sustainable finance, which is basically, I guess, the hallmark of ESG, and really embed it into the organization, really is part of everything we do. It's BAU, it's DNA. It's not that ESG department over there, or it's not corporate social responsibility over here. It's like it's in everybody, in everybody's thinking. And I think we're not quite there yet, but things like this, the training, things like having champions within all businesses will help. But I think we do need to get there fast, that it's everyone's business. It's not just a certain department that's looking after sustainable finance, ESG, but that it's in everyone's mindset.
Yeah, I mean, again, just with the many companies that we work with, that's one of the sort of biggest topic that's in the market now. So final question, this is more just for my own curiosity. I know Gayle has mentioned earlier that you're the co-chair of Balance, which is a community that helps to achieve gender inclusion and equality. How do you see that DEI landscape shaping in the next 5 to 10 years, in particular in Asia?
It's a great question. And I think if we, in D&I more broadly, rather than just the gender diversity, I think I've seen it evolve during my career. I think what is really good is I feel people are much more open about their individuality, whatever that is, what's important to them. It might be sexual orientation, it might be gender, it might be religion, it might be ethnicity, it might be culture or something completely different. But people are really willing to talk about it and open up, which I think wasn't, when I started working, wasn't really the case. And I think the ERGs, the employee resource groups, have a real role in that in terms of creating communities of like-minded people who are willing to speak up and talk. And everyone needs kind of role model or someone that they can say, oh, they're like me. I feel I can be more myself now because I've seen someone like that. So I think that is a real positive. I think hopefully that can continue even more. It's more difficult in some markets than others on some topics, clearly. So how that continuing journey of opening up, specifically on gender, I did a speech for an event, and I did some research, and I looked into when was the term glass ceiling first coined, and it was before I was born.
Wow.
And I'm not young anymore, right? So I was a year before I was born, and I'm 44 now. So. And we're still talking about it, and we still haven't solved it, right? And some places have solved it better than others, so, in some industries and some countries. But I think, if you think about our organization, it's something we still talk actively about today, still try to get that gender equity and gender equality and more women in senior roles, basically. And so I wonder in 10 years, will we still be talking about it? I hope no.
Yeah.
I hope not. I hope it will just be something we don't need to discuss anymore, but I'm not sure yet. There has been great progress, but there's still a lot to do. Our global head in risk and compliance asked that we establish women in risk and compliance chapters in each of the regions. So I'm just leading the one for Asia, and I'll take out. Then you look at the stats, you look at director level, we're pretty good in Asia in risk and compliance, quite balanced. Well, quite 50-50, but not far. Once you look at the layer above and the layer above that, it's really off. And so I'm having dinner with a group of the ladies who are here with us in Hong Kong from across Asia tonight to talk about this. Like, why are we there? And then so few of us, the table will definitely be smaller than the table we're sat at now. And what's that? Because it's not that bad at this level, but how do you get to there? So my hope and my wish is this is not, we're not talking about this in 10 years, but I'm not 100% convinced yet.
Well, I'm glad that it's at least getting the attention and it's just, it's all about just keeping the progression going and closing that gap.
Definitely.
Okay, so we have the final rapid fire rounds for you, Gayle. So I'm going to start. Okay, in one word, what is the biggest risk a financial services company will face 10 years from now?
So I'm really bad at one-word answers. And I thought of two things, but one is unknown unknowns. So we don't know what we don't know, right? So I think that how do we really do great horizon scanning? What are the emerging issues? I think is we need to tackle today. So we tackle that. And then I think I don't have a specific, but I'm sure it'll be related to technology and how we use technology in an appropriate way, how we integrate technology into teams so that it's your colleagues and your co-workers could also be tech.
Yeah.
And the social impacts of that, right? The S of the ESG, how will you're going to have less employees. How will we manage that? How will we do that over time, etc. So I think something around how technology is really integrated into organizations.
I agree with that. And I just feel like, we'll have tech, we'll figure that out, and then something else will come up. So to your point, how do you manage that or forecast that, foresee that? Okay, in one word, what will be the most important skill for a CRO 10 years from now? It's a bit of a tricky one.
It's hard to, I think resilience, but I actually think that now, so I'm not sure. But I think you see it in your industry, I see it in mine, constant change, right? And there's kind of the only thing that's for certain is things that will change, right? And people who are like, oh, well, when are we going to stop having change programs? Or when are we going to stop implementing new things? I think never. Yeah. And that pace of change has just been evolving so fast. I think at least in the last 5, maybe 10 years, I think that will continue to evolve fast. And I think if you have to be really grounded and have strong resilience if everything else around you is changing.
I know. The changes now in the current market is just even faster and faster. Sometimes I'm just like, okay, can I really keep up with this pace? All right. One final question, Gayle. One professional achievement of which you're most proud of?
I struggle with this question to pick one thing, but generally the things that across my career I've been most proud of is normally people related and how people. So I really have a strong view that when you go to do something, whether that's in personal or professional life, I want to make a difference. And when I've got left that difference is sustainable, it works, and it wasn't me who was making it work. And so I feel the bits when I've been most proud of when I've seen people who I've maybe coached or mentored or have been my direct reports go on to do a really bigger job, especially when they really didn't think they could. And they've had to be, and it's often, unfortunately, women who think, oh, I'm not sure I could do it. And really encourage someone to go for it and they get the job. I really take a big satisfaction from that.
That's a very, very nice testament to the kind of leader that you are.
Thank you.
So I think we're done for today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, Gayle. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Risky Women Radio. Be part of the ongoing conversation and learn more about our events and other programs at riskywomen.org.